요렇게 포인트 하면은 이게 잡히려나요?
네네. 가까이.
아주 요렇게.
지금 제 화면 보시면.
네네. 요렇게 찍어서 여기 이렇게 해서 잡히네요.
네네네.
요 라인 여기. 그쵸, 여기.
네.
알겠습니다. 이렇게 하면 되겠네요.
네네.
It's about 10:20 in the morning, and if you ask me when is the best time to visit Gyeongbokgung Palace, I'll say anywhere between 9:30 and 10:30 when the sun is not too high and it's not too bright, but yet you have a great lighting to look at this building. This is Gyeongjeon, and the reason that I took you to this side of the courtyard is that you see the building between the two mountains, or you may say it's a hill. We have one hill over here, and also we have mountain over here. And this curvature in the roof, they are scientifically, it gives the best angle to give equal pressure to all the columns, supporting columns, and also the raindrops will fall evenly. And also compared to the mountains and hills on this side,
네, 감사합니다.
it naturally flows into this, the two tiers of the roof, and also on this side, this tip, draw the imaginary line, it goes naturally, smoothly with a background. Goes back to the same concept that I said earlier, where the background comes into the foreground and the buildings blend into the background. Thus, it's not necessarily necessary for us to change the lawn every season or take care of these trees. So this is another ingenuine invention, I must say, that our forefathers had. You see this big open space. This used to be where government offices were, but however, I want to take your attention to this building right here. If you know, one of the greatest kings that ever lived in Korean history, his name is King Sejong, and we believe that in this building, that's where he created a Korean alphabet and what's known as Korean. Prior to 15th century, we all relied on Chinese characters. Although we had our spoken language, our written language was based on Chinese characters. And back in the day, the King Sejong, well, as we call Sejongdaewang, he stuck himself in here. He locked himself in until he came out with a system of alphabets that we now known as Korean, that he invented and he published in this building. Of course, at the time, from the time of King Sejong, during the mid-15th century, this building had been torn down, burnt down, rebuilt and renamed. Now we call it Sujeongjeon, but we know that this, based on our history books, that this is where the Korean language was invented. Now, some of you with good eye might notice that there's a big building hidden behind that tree. We're gonna go to the Gyeongbogung Pavilion, and those of you who are big fans of BTS will also might recognize that this was in one of their music videos recently. They performed for the USA's the NBC network's Jimmy Fallon show, and they were standing between the columns. Now, you can see that this is floating on a pond. This is a man-made pond, and this pond actually has natural water flow. So there's 3 points where it's difficult to see from this angle, but it has 3 points of where the water can enter, and also have 2 different exit points for the water. So the southwest side of the pond is actually angled so the water can flow out. Inside of the pavilion, every time there was an event happening at the main throne hall, there was an after party here. But not only that, when you go up there, and I'm gonna show you a picture, when you go up there and look into the buildings, look into the palace, it reminds you of the small hills and mountains. The Korean peninsula is consisted of 70% mountains and hills. And by looking in, a person, a king or queen or any guests are to feel like, oh, this is what it feels like to look at the Korean peninsula from up above. It also reminds them that although they are somewhat trapped inside the palace, king and the queen, although they have all the power, they couldn't just walk out of the palace to stroll around the city or around the country, because there will be a major security disaster. That we provided this means for them to enjoy the view and for them to feel like what they are representing and what they are, like why they are doing their job for. So this is one of the pavilions. In the bottom, there's 49 columns to support this huge structure. And I want to take your attention to the corner of the roof. You see the little statues are standing alongside the corner. In Korean, we call them japsang. They are supposedly the characters that came from the story Journey to the West. More you have them on the roof corner, the more important the building is. So in there, including the dragon's head, we have about 11 of them. In comparison, the main throne hall, which is on the other side, at the corner, it has about 9. Every building that we pass by, you can ask me to pause, and I will zoom in once we get to a more closer confines. But this is on almost every corner of every roof. Their primary job, it's very similar to the hete or hechi, which means to cast away the bad spirit. In Western culture, I guess the similarity will be made to gargoyles that you have on the side of the buildings. And now we're entering a king's everyday office. The big building that we were at, that's only for the main special events. Once again, like coronation of a king, or the birth of a prince, or visitors from China. However, that to work in that big building every day, it's not really efficient. So this building right here, this is the everyday office for the king. We call it 사정전. And in this building, it has a very similar settings. Same painting in the background.
네, 감사합니다.
But it's sitting on the lesser, the one layer foundation as to 2 on the other side. And we'll take a quick look at the inside. So once again, we have the same, the red and white dot with 5 peaks. Some tour guides or some books might refer to them as the sun represents the king, the moon is represented as queen, but many scholars say that might be a wrong assumption. Being a king, you just represent that you're God sent from heaven. So I'm going to take a little bit of a moment to explain about this sundial. What's remarkable about this sundial is this one not only tells time, but it also tells you which season and what time the sun will set. This is very significant. Once again, the great king Sejong, the 4th king of Joseon out of 27 kings, he didn't like the idea that we were always relying on Chinese sundial or Chinese star map, because China from Beijing to Korea, it's over 1,000 kilometers. We have a different climate, different weather. So he didn't want us to follow the Chinese rules. And oftentimes it wasn't a great match for our weather. So King Sejong ordered his men to come up with a more accurate time and the season teller. He was a great king, but he was the horrible boss. because he will not let his employees go home. His officials were often asked to stay here all night, all season. They weren't allowed to go home or retire. So, but King, what he has done for Korean culture is unbelievable. Now, from King's personal everyday office, passing this gate, now we're going into a personal space. This is King's private area. Even the royal guards, only the authorized ones are allowed to be here. And this little foundation, this is a stage. Oftentimes, court jesters or musicians will perform in front of the king, and the king will sit right here. Now, there's a big hall in the middle, but there are rooms to the left and the rooms to the right. And you can see maybe that the rooms have layers. In fact, each side there's about 12 rooms. 네, 끊고 가고 이렇게 가면서 if you look inside, there's a little small hallway again. The room inside. On the next window, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 rooms with sliding door, which you can open or close. This same thing over here. So this was done so that every night, for security reasons, a king himself actually doesn't know until he goes to bed which side or which room he'll be sleeping at. So in case there's any assassination attempt, they'll have to take a guess if it's on the left side or the right side. Not only that, they'll have to go through room by room to take a guess where the king is sleeping. Of course, by the time they make so much noise, the guards will come and kill the assassin or arrest the assassin. Now I'll choose that. Now, this was a king's private residence, and we're gonna go to the queen's personal area. Yes, king and the queen, they all had their own space. And when the king was in charge of running the country, queen was in charge of running the palace. So if you look around, okay, there are many rooms on the side by the entrance. This is all queen's personnel, the servants. In king's quarters, we really didn't see this many rooms. So over here you have the paintings, segments of the paintings. But since the window is open, it's hard to see, so I'm going to give you the full picture. One of the queen's the responsibilities is to give birth to a healthy prince. So in King's Chamber, we saw these paintings of sun and the moon, but in Queen's Chamber, we have this painting of 10 animals with longevity. This is to store the ingredients that are used to cook for the king. To give you a little bit of idea about Korean cuisine, what those terrawares, or those ceramic wares, is that they have these micro holes in them, so they naturally breathe. It controls the oxidation process so that it ferments and produces a good fungus for us. 아, 너무 좋은데요? 이런 반응만 나오면 진짜 좋겠다. Look to your right. Right now, you can see that they're having a renovation. In that gray, red building, we have a picture of what it looks like. And now we are approaching almost the back side, the north end of this palace, and it's called the Gyeongbokgung. Our 26th king, Gojong, he was the man who brought in a lot of Western cultures and influences. This whole building is a mixture of Korea, China, and even a little bit of a European style of building. They use the bricks, the octagon-shaped pagoda that has 2 split floors. It is all part of what was hip in the architectural scene in early 19th century.